Also, a big thank you to Yubi for working in association with us for this particular thing. And I also want to welcome. Thanks Shikhar for joining us. Nagaraju, thanks for joining us, and Dinesh, right? So a little bit of I think just picking up from the context, right, from what probably Krisha just said, right. We are looking at a world wherein software is eating the world. You are supposed to keep bringing in the newer innovations into the market, have a strong focus on your product, strong focus on your customer. And customer experience is all that is really becoming more and more relevant in context to what probably competition is doing. And that's the only thing probably that's just going to keep you ahead of times. Now, in these scenarios, right, I understand what just Krish said, right, the value of shipping it fast. But I want to take a step back here, and I want to really get into the nuances of where do you see in the entire supply chain of bringing these these software faster into the thing, right? What are the core bottlenecks, right? Let's assume you have a 50 people engineering team working on the product. Shikhar, you're from PhonePe, and you guys, we all know what PhonePe does, right? Where do you see where were the bottlenecks, and when did you really, how did you start identifying them, and how did you think about we want to make them a super you?
Yep. Okay. Our origin story with the no-code journey has been slightly unique in the sense that we didn't really, look at bringing in a tool to do things faster. Of course, that was one of the very important use cases. However, as all of you know, PhonePe is a very strongly regulated entity, right? So there's a lot of compliance and a lot of audits that happen on most of our code bases. So what had started happening by the time we started evaluating Drona and we started writing, figuring out what to do going forward, we had a number of consoles, and they were mushrooming up from different parts of the organization. And it just so happened that we ran into an audit where we had to upgrade version of one of our libraries. What that meant at that point in time was we have to stop all development and get everyone to move to this updated version. And that was the point where Nagaraju and I and some of the other engineers started to brainstorm around this fact that, hey, today it's 50. There are 20 more in the pipeline, and obviously we want to grow as an organization. When it becomes 200, if something like this happens, this is going to be a deterrent in the movement, that the agility that you're talking about. It's going to actually take our focus away from this. And PhonePe is very in terms of being compliant, it comes first, right? So we don't really want to sacrifice on the good things that we represent. And that was kind of the origin story. We thought, okay, how about we bring everything to a place where we are able to at least have these levers centrally. So yeah, that was the starting point of...
so you saw a big threat in a library update,
yep,
which probably stall a lot of stuff that's going to happen in yours, take the focus away from what the customers really need, and eventually push it back on the okay, fair enough. Dinesh, what's your go-to story, right? I mean,
so,
yeah.
So I think we're a platform play.
Sure.
We're a platform play, and we are well past the age of saying you can have it in any color as long as it's black. Everybody wants their own custom story.
Sure.
Right? And how we build that is basically making everything configurable. But managing those configurations, again, bottlenecks on the same team that built the software for the configurations, right? And hence, to disrupt that linear delivery of saying, go back to the same developer who built the software to configure it, just doesn't make sense. And sort of making that itself as something that we can sort of package out and let everybody who wants to use it configure it it within the limits of what is allowed within the system is what gives us our ability to satisfy our customers' needs while building on one platform. Right? Building custom solutions, sort of wasteful in terms of effort because you're tied and can't scale. Building it configurable but having configurations come back to the development team, it's the same bottleneck as building it over and over again. Building it with a console which can configure everything that is available at the platform level is what enables us to sort of scale up, speed up development and delivery for our customers, right? And that is the play we have in terms of saying, we went down the path of another low-code tool earlier to build this, and then we discovered that, hey, that really doesn't fit our requirements, both in terms of functionality and in terms of pricing. And that's when the Drona journey happened for us, right?
Sure. No, absolutely. But like, taking a cue from that, you don't go back to the same developer because he is eventually like, probably embroiled into doing 10 additional things as per like, what you really want to do. And here is a new customer who's stepping in and he wants some new configuration. Now, balancing the two was really where you probably thought, can there be a super U or some sort of a tool which can really enable someone to do this thing in a better way? Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So as a developer, you're building a feature, you say, hey, it can work in N of these configurations, and you built it, you moved on to the next interesting problem, picked the next problem, and you don't want to be constantly dragged down to your legacy of saying, oh, since you built this tool, you have to go reconfigure it for this other use case. You already built that functionality. There's no sense in getting the same developer to say, okay, now come back from whatever you're doing and redo whatever you did just by setting a configuration and testing it, right? And that is, it's so much more, streamlined to say, this is already built, this is available in this place. But if you have to build extra tooling for it, it slows the whole development process down. And that's where the low-code, no-code framework comes in to say, you don't need to build extra tooling on top of it. As part of what you built, you just have to plug it into this new framework, and anybody can come and tweak how it's configured and realize what our use case they want to. Right? And that's the true value that we see. In terms of letting the developer sort of move ahead without being tied back to what they built 1 year ago, 6 months ago, whatever the time frame was. Every time there's a change required. And two, getting the client-facing teams to say, I can reconfigure this exactly the way the client wants and make them happier.
So in terms of, let's assume you bring a low code as a part of a tooling stack, right? Say in case of PhonePe, for example, right? You made this available largely to your engineers. And once you really got there, right? How did you start? What would the KPIs for success would look like for somebody like, for you to keep investing in the technology, in keeping your faith in the tooling stack, right? That this is really working out. What were your North Star metrics, and what were your overall? How would you define success at maybe a year down the line, or maybe 18 months down the line?
Okay, it's almost been a year now since we went live with the tool. Okay. One thing that we've been very aggressively tracking is the turnaround time for one single console to, from start to end, for it to go live. Compared to the conventional methods of, assigning a dev or two and going through the entire development cycle, which used to, on an average, takes anywhere from 3 to 6 months for like a 10-page console with medium complexity. We have brought it down to roughly 3 weeks. This has been like, we've been very aggressively chasing the ease of bringing something up and taking it live. I feel a lot of other metrics are vanity. I can talk about the number of consoles that we're bringing up on an average every week. That's like close to 5. We've managed to convert a lot of existing old consoles, move them to the new stack. And so far we've done 100, 120 consoles live on the tool that we've created. So, but what we're really tuning in, what we're trying to calibrate right now is the time it takes for a developer to start and ship. So, and it's not just, sorry if I'm digressing, it's not just the capability of the platform, it's also the ecosystem around it, which means the education and understanding the pain points of a developer and documentations and processes around it. So that's what we're, that's our North Star. We want to actually bring it down to probably a week.
So you want to ship a console a week. That's, if that really happens, like, this is probably success. Otherwise, it would have been like, taking way more time than probably a week, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to build a console a week, that is. I don't want to outrun the requirements.
And how much do you see, like, maybe a question to any of you would like to take, right? Tools like these are complex, right? Since, like, you are the one who's taking it to the developers internally and, like, taking them up to speed and giving them sort of a comfort that, hey, this really, like, this is how it's supposed to be done to truly achieve a console a week. What kind of, do you see, like, a new developer who's, like, hooking onto your tool, onto the low-code tool versus somebody who's been there? Do you see a difference over there? And if yes, how do you look at, like, the ramp-up time for these new engineers who are picking up onto these new tools?
Okay. Again, I'd like to consider our journey slightly unique. What we did was, before we opened it up to everyone, luckily, our hack day coincided with our release. What we did initially was, during the hack day, we set up our tool and asked everyone to, try it out for your hacks as a front end. So instead of them actually asking a UI developer or front end developer to, pair along, we took workshops and we told people to use it. That helped us a lot in like spreading awareness, evangelizing the tool, and when people actually, like, we got real feedback. So we kind of did like a small beta with the hack day thing. Apart from that, there are obviously some challenges. There are challenges in terms of resistance to change. People who are already writing code in a certain fashion have to, like, it's velocity change. Even if it is faster, it's change in how they work, right? The workflow changes. A developer comes in the morning, takes a pull, and then starts again, right? This changes the way they have to build. It changes the way they're working throughout the day as well, right? So obviously there's that resistance to change, which takes time. In my opinion, there is no real solution to it apart from, giving it more time. And what we've realized, and this is something I was discussing with Nagaraju, it's easier with people who were not writing front-end code, meaning back-end engineers are faster here compared to front-end engineers. And this is, like, obviously you would think that this would be the other way around, but turns out that the back-end engineers have been, more open to how it works because they're not carrying any existing
they're a beneficiary in your opinion. Yeah. What do you think is the right audience for, like, for using a low-code tool?
So the way we look at it, right, and we've been relatively new in that journey, and we've sort of gone the evangelism route. We have a central team which sort of supports all the teams to say, if you have any queries, come back here and we'll help you out with it. And since they already had use cases on another low-code platform, say migrate that over here. But ideally, what we want is saying anybody developing anything, thinking about it as saying, what are the, what would go into the control panel for this? What is the configurability I would need at any given point in time for this? And how do I sort of add that to the appropriate place in the control panel so that as a feature goes, the control for it also goes with it, right? So I see this as not something that would be used only for a set of people working on, say, operational requirements or admin requirements, but also on every feature that can potentially take configuration, thinking about saying, if I need to do this configuration and I don't want anybody coming back to me saying, I need this change for this deployment, how would I be putting this into the control panel and sort of taking it from there?
So there's a very interesting point you made, right? You are saying now in the 2B state, the way you're looking at it is, you're not thinking control panel features as an afterthought. You are basically tying it up at the design stage, and you're saying, if this is the feature that we're building, what my control panel is going to be looking at.
Absolutely.
Looking like at that point in time. And is this like, a change which is being enabled because of a low code in your stack in some sense, Dinesh?
Absolutely. See, because anything that is done internal, be it by the implementation team, be it by the development team, is also lower in priority than a customer facing ask.
Correct.
That is the nature of how it is. We need to satisfy our customers' needs as quickly as possible, but we are in a platform play. We know this is not being built for one customer. This will never be built for one customer, and it will not be consumed in the same way by all customers. And so configurability is going to be part of that play, and figuring out how that configurability can be unbundled from the actual code and from the actual developer or team that built it is going to be part of that building that feature. Right?
Interesting. Things are going headless in that sense.
In a sense,
and
yes.
you're saying that the head is going to be now like plugged into your solution as and when you start deploying it to your customers.
Absolutely.
Maybe like, for the benefit of a lot of people who might not really know the complexity of your deployments, right? It might be interesting if you can just touch upon a little bit, how is low code really traveling along with for every customer? Is it like all on cloud? Is it all going to be self-hosted, or how is it like, maybe you can just touch upon it how much ever
Sure.
you can?
So our platform is deployed both on-prem and in the cloud. So we have a multi-tenant cloud where multiple tenants come in and can have different configurations based on the tenant who is logging in and which partnership they're working with, because it is a marketplace. It's a two-sided marketplace, right? And based on that relationship or the entity that's coming in, it can work in a different configuration, right? And that needs to be sort of realized by configuring the appropriate system, right? Sure. And that config so far was a set of configs that went in a deployment time saying this is what needs to be done, and this is how it works for this entity ID versus this partnership ID. Now taking that off, putting that on a console sort of enables a different kind of velocity and different kind of pluggability in terms of the marketplace, right? And that's what we're looking at, and that's how we're looking at this journey. The other part being on-prem, saying on-prem typically are air-gapped environments because of the security requirements of our customers, and even we don't have any access there, right? And which means finding something, changing something means multiple authorizations to visit, deploy, and reconfigure systems on their side, which is a tedious process, which is a long-term sort of a resource sink in terms of getting somebody there, understanding what they're doing, understanding why they need to do it, and then figuring out how to configure it. Now, by enabling a platform where that can be done, this is as simple as saying, okay, here are the changes you need to make. We can send somebody over to make it for you, or you can make it on yourself, right?
Interesting. So are you saying that you're eventually, like, when you start deploying it for your customers, you are seeing this in this headless configuration, somewhere your customer is going to touch upon the learning curve of a low code and think about, okay, I need these new configurations to be done, and they can just do it by themselves. Is that how you see?
But not going the full hog in that journey,
Sure.
as in saying they will develop systems onto configuration. We're looking at them as consumers of this configuration and being able to reconfigure existing capabilities within the system based on what they need. The whole hog there would be to say bringing in their systems also into the same panel and sort of making sure that, but that's, it's a journey. I think we'll get there.
Sure. And looking at you, right, both of your use cases are like, you're all a little bit different, right? You're doing it like, I want to build a platform, I want to make it all headless, and configuration is not a thing that I really want to be bothered, right, as part of my product life cycle, because different customers really need different stuff. And I think from your way I see, how is it in PhonePe's context, right? Every console is meant to support operations for large part of the business, and you guys are getting into lending and maybe all the different insurance and whatnot, right? So how do you see, like, as and when you step into a new business, right? A lot of people tell me, like, when we talk to customers, they've been telling us, hey, we have already built our consoles, right? And right now we don't really see, okay, this is where we are. But you as PhonePe, do you see that there's an entire life cycle to your consoles? It just doesn't stop at 1.0 and it keeps going on to 2.0, 3.0, as in how your businesses are evolving, compliance is at the regulatory end is evolving. Is that how you see it? And is that a motivation behind, or we need something like, to be really agile, really quick in that sense?
Yes, of course. I mean, that was one of the motivations to actually go down the low code, no code path. Yes, like most of our consoles are powering, again, as you mentioned, a lot of operations inside the org. And yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons we as you mentioned, I can understand your customers when they tell you that we already have consoles, right? And that was one of the motivations to actually go down and build something on our own, because we wanted that transition to actually be kind of seamless, meaning that if there's a console that is working today, we cannot have a completely different interface tomorrow and train people who are, and the people are like, for instance, the consumers of these dashboards are customer care executives, for instance, right?
Sure.
And training them is essentially making them go through a training program. So, right, for us, we wanted to build something that we could just swap out in place. So, yeah, I agree with what you just mentioned.
So what you're saying is essentially, because your current state was the consoles were already there,
Yeah.
and then you're bringing in low code, and so you had a whole migration story as a step one, as your day one, before you even embark on the journey of, say, new consoles, one console a week, or you just looked at, okay, whatever we have given is a real estate, let it be there, but let's start with the brand new things which are coming your way.
It was the latter. What happened was we started with the newer consoles on the tool, and we reached a point where, we obviously, which when you say one console a week, you get done really fast.
Correct.
So it actually happened that we had a lot of bandwidth from people who were working on consoles. And what we started doing immediately once the newer ones were done, we started slowly migrating parts of the consoles. And again, there are some consoles that are still being migrated, but we managed to do the migrations really fast as well. So,
Awesome.
yeah.
And in your context, right, when your customer is like, probably every time you're acquiring a new customer, Dinesh, right? So okay, let me take a step back here, right? So let me bring in another, one of the American companies that, we have an opportunity to work with, right? For them, onboarding a new customer is a 9-month cycle, right? So imagine, like, they are, they're trying to, just to give you a context, right? They are in the employee benefits and that space, right? So every time, let's assume I have to go and onboard a Walmart, 400,000 people. I'm going to bring in a lot of the data which was probably like, with the earlier processor into the new processor, right? Let's assume this customer is the new processor. And now it takes them 8 to 9 months to bring in, like, this customer onboarded into the system and start getting alive, right? In your case, right, winning a new customer on your platform and getting them alive and making them, go live was, say, how do you see that changing in the 2B state with low-code? Do you see any impact over there, Dinesh?
So obviously, yes. Operations is where we started with, because
Sure.
that was what was in the older provider, and we migrated that. But going forward, a large part of a new onboarding is going to be configuration of the product, right? And a lot of that configuration will be moved. Some of them is already, but a large part of that will be moved to Drona in terms of getting the implementation to do that, rather than getting the developers involved in that, right? The second part is a large portion of it is basically like PhonePe also. Compliance plays a major role. So that is also part of the cycle. And having the right controls, having audit on those controls on who made the change, when, why, and what operations were run, what were the batch jobs that were run, having all of that sort of, in one place rather than in multiple consoles, multiple tools, sort of expedites the whole process in terms of onboarding, right? So yes, is it the ideal scenario right now? No, we haven't got to that place, but we're building out to that, and that's
Sure.
where we want to see that compression come in.
Is there a tussle between the sales guys and sales teams and hey, we have a new customer and we really want to
Constantly, constantly, right? That is reality for all of us.
Absolutely, and this is one of the ways in which probably you think this could potentially help you do things faster.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Because we keep facing this time and again, right? With a lot of our customers, they keep coming back to us. We unfortunately don't have that sort of silver bullet in terms of how do we speed things up. But it's great because in the moment you go headless, your product is you are able to now put in a lot of control to just about a separate team rather than in this. So coming back, right, do you see at some point in time your engineering team structuring can really there is a headless thing which is probably on the platforming and this entire thing can start separating at some point in time. Is that how you see it, or from an engineering org perspective at some point in time you have a view on that?
So I think not so much from an engineering org perspective, but from the build-out perspective, as saying, how will this be operated in a client premise versus in the multi-tenant, starts to become part of your build-out itself rather than an afterthought. Usually it's the functionality that gets built first and then saying, okay, now how will we operate it in this environment?
Sure.
And for that, you sort of build the constructions and sort of come back with saying, here are the other things that we need. I think that is where we're sort of trying to change this, saying, okay, if we're building this, now we know this will need to be operated in a different manner by different teams, be it on the client premise or by our operation team, and how will we enable that? I think that is becoming part of this journey because the delta to sort of enable it on top of the APIs is minimal.
Sure, but I think from PhonePe's perspective, right, enabling your GTM, your go-to-market, right, in the sense that you are launching a newer vertical, maybe insurance or maybe anything else, right? Today, these enabling these operations is also going to be a large part of probably even as a part of a consideration in terms of going to market, right? And when you are saying I'm going to cut down my, say at some point in time, console a week or something like that, do you see this also having an impact on your GTM at some point in time, your ability to support business way faster?
Of course, I mean there are no two ways about it for in this regard. See, but at the end of the day, it is a contributor for sure, but it's a sum of a lot of other things. So it does, I mean, it does increase your overall efficiency for sure. But to say that it's going to drastically impact, it would be unfair on all the other things that go into
Sure.
taking something live. So
Sure.
yeah, but being able to ship, specifically talking about consoles, being able to ship out consoles faster, yes, if whatever contributor that is to the overall process, it's definitely improved, and we hope that it will continue to.
Sure. So net, in today, when you're thinking about, maybe in a futuristic world, right? Let's assume there are things that probably, you would think today probably, it's more or less on the console side of things that, you are touching the, you're trying to experiment or you're trying to use this in that context. What are the other areas that you think you are fascinated, or you think this could be also the areas where probably you might want to think about in the future state, to probably where it can potentially help your other businesses? Have you given a thought to that, or it's right now, too fast, too furious with the consoles?
See, I can talk about, to be honest, like too early into the journey to be thinking about like a North Star. Right now, we're solving a need, but I can talk about a side effect which is very, very interesting, which kind of blends into what you're alluding to. What has happened ever since people started becoming aware of a tool existing, what used to be very ineffective but very trivial work, like people have started automating them. And that's something that like we discovered it was very serendipitous for us to know. We recently got to hear that there was a workflow where somebody used to send an engineer an email with the PDF files, and they used to, upload those PDF files and send out a mail that, hey, this is uploaded. That engineer over a weekend actually created a console which has maker checker baked in and handed over to the team, right? So I see more of such use cases evolving. Honestly, I would like to see what can be done. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I haven't really given a thought to, we definitely are looking at LLMs to, in the direction of LLMs to help people, as we were just speaking a while ago, as a means for them to interact with the tool. However, too early. I think we're yet to reach our full potential and then look at keeping our heads low and focusing on getting what we're after.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
Sure thing. Interestingly, right? I mean, like, when you speak in the context to LLMs, and we also speak in context to, like, templatizing a few things, right? Dinesh, do you see, like, any of these things probably, like, when you go from customer 1 to maybe customer 100, right? Certain parts would be probably, like, you should be able to spin up, like, by the time you reach 100 customer, right, in this headless mode, where you're powering the console in this manner, like, you should be able to ship things like, not even like, in a week's time, but because 80% is already there for most of your customers, different skins. Is that the way you see it?
So I don't know so much of whether that is new consoles, right? See, the way we look at it is a new flavor of the product enabled by the console. It's the same console. It's just that it has more actions.
Sure.
It has more composite actions. Today it could be very fine-grained actions. And like they were referring to in terms of what will evolve, I think it will be emergent that you will see composite actions come in, saying it's a multi-step workflow rather than just a console action as an admin action. I think that is where it would naturally evolve towards. I don't see the use cases where we would spin up 20 variants of the same console, because I think we want to limit the number of variations of the console, because ultimately it's the product variants that matter, not the way to administer them. Right?
No, absolutely. So, interestingly, right, back in the, like, room when we were just there, like, you made one interesting point, that every time, like, there is a small change, right, that would really come in the yesteryears, right, if a drop down has to be replaced by a text box or vice versa, right, and there is an entire cycle over there. And in the today's world, now that you are, like, with the married the low code world, how do you see the difference? Is it like, if you just want to talk about it, like, for the benefit of people here, one?
Yeah, I mean, earlier, as I was mentioning, that any change follows the entire SDLC process, and it has to. I mean, these are the guardrails we put in to ensure that we adhere to a certain quality. The inherent nature of bringing in a process is that it slows the output down to a certain extent, maximizing overall efficiency. However, with having a WYSIWYG style, like a editor, what has happened is, like, we've seen product managers just work along with the developers sitting next to them and figuring out, hey, can you, can we do this? And the resistance has gone down a lot because the developer also doesn't really have to do a lot. It's essentially modifying a console and deploying it. A serendipitous side effect is our product managers have started to learn JavaScript. So yeah, it's definitely helped.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Dinesh, what's your view on this?
Yeah, just to add to that, right? Like a minor change on an internal facing tool is always going to be under priority pressure, because it is at best the blast radius of that is to be a few internal folks, and is always going to get deprioritized till somebody loses interest and say, okay, just take it off the list. And hence, and that introduces inefficiencies in the operations, because somebody is having to key in something rather than select it, somebody is having to, and those inefficiencies build up as you go, right? This gives you a quick way to sort of change that and not have to wait for it to get prioritized with everything and tested and go through the whole cycle for of deployments and like the standard SDLC, while limiting any adverse impact to that one console, to that one screen, right? And so you sort of getting the best of both worlds in terms of getting quick iterations while putting the guardrail into which your original SDLC was supposed to guardrail.
Sure thing. And if at all, you have to say one thing, right, that probably if the new, say, engineering leaders out there who probably may not have started this journey, if one thing probably you want to leave with them in terms of when is the right time to even think about investing into, say, something like a low-code tool, and for which kind of use cases they should really think, what would that be?
I'll speak from our experience.
Sure.
It might not apply to everyone. However, I believe that we started at a very good time. There's always a point where you can see your workloads increase and coming your way, right? We could see that the frequency of such asks for creating a console had started increasing. That was the point where we realized, and in fact we could have done it slightly sooner, I believe, but that's the point. In your organizational, an organization's timeline, there is always going to be a point when there's they're growing, and a lot of us are trying to reach the hyperscale, right? So you have to keep your ears on the ground and see there would be a point, that inflection point where you can see that your teams are going to become a bottleneck for the company to grow. That is the point. I feel just before that is when you should, there's no harm in evaluating such tools and keeping them handy for the time when you experience
Sure.
that inflection point.
Dinesh, you have a view on this?
Yeah, so just to, I think, sort of state that in a different way, because I agree completely. I think if you figured out your linear delivery value chain, in terms, you got a product market fit and you're going to scale, right? You know the linear SDLC that is going to deliver that value. Now that's going to become the bottleneck because it is linear. That is where you sort of bring in, a way to sort of fan out and say, I can deliver more with lesser people because it doesn't bottleneck on the same SDLC process, right? I think that is the most appropriate time to sort of get the low-code platform in, to sort of say it's not only linear, it's also horizontal in that sense.
Sure. And maybe in the interest of time, we have about 5 or 7 minutes left. I don't know if you have any questions there, but if you want to to conclude, right? If somebody is really has to embark on this journey today, what should be the start point? How should they really be looking at these kind of tools? What should be the lens that they should wear, if any? If you have any, you've been there, right? You've been there before, and when you were looking at it, you migrated from one low-code to another. So maybe what are your learnings? What do you think?
Well, so I wasn't involved in the old low-code, so
Sure.
I don't have the original. As part of the migration, I think, focusing on where the users are, where is it most often used, and sort of maximizing that value, right, is what has sort of helped us rapidly roll out the new platform.
Sure.
Right? And yes, there will always be the delta of saying, hey, we can't do this, these actions are not enabled, or these are not efficiently enabled on this. There always will be the delta. But compared to what it would take to build it out from scratch, this is always going to be more efficient. Right? So in that sense, there is always the temptation to say, we can build this better for our use case, but giving up that last 5%, last 10% to achieve, better velocity across the 90% is a more than worthwhile trade-off in our judgment.
Sure, sure. And maybe Shikhar, from your, if at all you might just want to, for the people who are not really embarked on this journey yet, but what is the right direction in which probably they should really look at, this as a part of the tooling stack? What would be your concluding comments on this?
Kind of agree to Dinesh here. The right approach would be to focus. See, you need to, this is not something that you bring in to as an auxiliary, something that adds auxiliary value to the organization. You need to understand what value it's going to bring in. For us, it was the ability to actually execute and focus on the output, right? So if you're, again, if you're mindful of what value it brings, I feel that's something that you should, there are no, it's a no-brainer. Also, investing in training and education around these tools also give you an exponential value, in my opinion. So whenever you do it, I would say also make sure that a lot of drop-offs happen because people struggle to understand these tools. There's a lot of misconceptions around the capabilities of these tools. A lot of these times what had happened was that people think that these tools cannot do complex things. And the sequence of 5 whys, when we go down asking them why do you think so, we've always eventually ended up with a why not. So I feel, again, circling back to the same point, invest in a lot of education, make sure that you know what the tool's capabilities are, and there's no bad time to bring in, even if you're deep into, for us we were a 12 billion company when we started. So
sure.
Yeah, it's never too late.
Perfect. That sounds awesome. But there were a lot of objections, as you were mentioning, right? Oh, I can't build these complex things, and they need I think some sort of maybe some sort of a reference use case, in that sense, like, hey, here are the largest use cases that probably have been built or something like that, right? Maybe, I don't know, I'm just thinking about it, maybe I don't know if it helps.
For sure. Yeah, okay. Our entire incident management system,
okay,
the entire system is built on this tool today. So whenever there's an outage or
across PhonePe, you
across
mean to say?
PhonePe,
okay,
there's an incident that gets automatically created, and we follow the entire journey through that tool, where we update our RCAs and eventually publish them, and track what is happening, creates a Slack channel for people. So all of that entire tool is built on the no-code tool.
awesome.
Yeah.
And if you had to do it differently, not low code versus, let's assume if you would have done it probably traditional ways, do you see there are huge gains in doing what you did via low code?
I mean, we've drawn a line in the sand for what it can do and it cannot.
Sure.
I won't build a consumer-facing product today on this tool. By consumer-facing, I mean the products that we ship out to our end users. For instance, share market and pin code and our payments gateway. because the inherent nature of these tools, the optimization that we do are non-standard. So wherever the line in the sand is, wherever we want to do standard things, we do this. The point from which we want to digress from standard to non-standard, there are a lot of customization. We wrote our own protocol for instance for streaming real-time data, right? The effort that I would put there versus here is going to be immensely different, right?
Absolutely.
So to answer your question, I don't think I would not do, like for instance the tool that I talked about, right? I would not go down no code, go down the path of actually writing it on from scratch. But consumer facing is something that I wouldn't do, and that's again, as I mentioned, very clear boundaries around what we do with that code and with that tool and without it.
Fair enough. I think. Thank you so much. Let's hear from people if they have any questions. If you would like to check with them, just in case. Yep.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Kind of.
So, like, it was a great talk. Honestly, in our company, we have never used a low-code tool. Although we do deal with a lot of enterprises, because as you were talking about onboarding, you mentioned that some company took about 9 months to onboard a new customers, and that same thing happens with us. We deal with healthcare centers. So each new customer takes about 2 to 3 months to onboard, and around 20 hours a month of team's time, and most of it is around configurations only. That somebody wants this feature to be there, somebody wants to change in this color, and this is like a simpler aspect of it. The complexity could be like that inside this hierarchy they want something like, and I always pondered upon that, could these complex actions could be handled by low-code tool or not. There are metadata driven forms in our system using which we do this thing at this point. So I have this question, like if you are creating a UI, is it predominantly most of the companies, for UI use React. So do these components get embedded inside React somehow, or how do the deployment go about it? I mean, say there is a deployment cycle of 2 weeks. So you're now it's the shipping time. So do you like ship it together with it? Do you have it set up differently? Like how is that done?
So maybe I can just. Sure. So if you're looking at today the low code tools generally which are available, the way we see it is the entire CI/CD is kind of stitched into it, right? So A is whatever that you spoke about, React, etc. Most of these things are pre-built components, prefabricated. So you are eventually you're not really thinking about either it is React or is it jQuery or whether it is Angular. Right? You don't really. That's not the start line. So you are basically essentially you are dragging and dropping your components. You are getting in place your console. The way.
No, I think I was not clear. So say we have a website, okay, and we currently maintain our configurations some way in a say in some other page,
right?
And now we want to embed this control panel inside our own website. Is it possible using a no-code tool?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So how is it done? Like, is it using an iframe or something?
Yeah, most likely.
Okay,
yes.
Okay.
So there are ways. There are it could be a simple iframe embed. It could be a secured iframe embed, depending on I mean, there are options available.
And how do you maintain deployments for that? So, yeah.
So generally, the deployments are done with your own, let's assume you run your own Git repo in some sense. So that's how you kind of going to get sync with your own Git repo at some point in time, and that's how you're going to maintain your own deployments.
Okay.
Right. But just in case if Shikhar or somebody would like to answer it differently, please.
So we're solutioning something very similar, and it's going to go through the same deployment. It's another service that's deployed like the rest of our services, right? And that's the way we look at, and the embedding is going to be realized by an iframe that we're going to embed into it with limited access. We don't want everybody messing with configurations on it, obviously. So with limited access, and then the same SDLC process for deploying any other code is followed even for the console.
Understood. That makes sense. Thank you.
Hi sir, it's a great panel. So I just started my startup. You mentioned about incident management system. So what are the parameters that I need to take to build an incident management system in my organization?
Okay. First, I mean, it's. Can you be a little more specific? This is.
Yeah, like you mentioned about incident management system, right? So what are the parameters that I need to take to build an incident management system?
What do you mean by parameters?
Like to build an incident management system.
Okay. With any system, there are like inputs, signals that you get from different. So with our incident management system, we have a service that you know, analyzes the events that we push, and events are of the nature basically telemetry events, and then there are custom events that we push from some of our front end or a back end system, and then we have a system that essentially analyzes if those certain analyzes basically crunches the raw events and tries to make sense if there's like an anomaly, right? And from there it essentially sends out a signal to that tool, and that tool creates like an incident and assigns it to, then again there are like many such systems that understand which part of the organization this incident has happened, and then assigns appropriate people, creates a Slack channel, and then there's this dashboard where everyone can log in and update what is happening. I mean, it's a slightly complex topic, so I'm sorry if I'm not.
Thank you. Thank you for it.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Abhishek. My question is in continuation with the topic where we are talking about whether we go ahead and adopt a low-code solution or not. Like particularly, you called out an example, maybe something that's customer-facing. Probably PhonePe would not go ahead and adopt a low-code solution for, to drive any changes and would go a standard way. Let's say we are talking about building consoles still. Are there certain examples where still you would prefer to go the conventional route rather than adopt a low-code solution? I'm just trying to understand here, what is the effort really that goes into adopting that low-code solution? You talked about, having worked on it, it was a one-day hackathon effort, but would there still be cases where you're building consoles for internal utilization, let's say, and probably, where you do not anticipate a lot of changes coming in at later point of time? Would you, what are the other cases or what are similar cases where you would definitely prefer to go the conventional route and not adopt low-code solutions?
For the use case that you mentioned, I would definitely go for a low-code solution. If I'm not maintaining it, I don't want to, create a repo, have a deployment pipeline, and then have somebody deploy it. Honestly, theoretically, in theory, I have, because I've been like deeply involved in this process for the last 1 year. As I mentioned, the 5 whys, like I don't see why we cannot use low-code tools for any. I have personally not come across a use case where there were, however, logistical challenges around certain places where there were existing dashboards and consoles that were up, and there weren't a lot of people working on. We could not spend enough time, and then there's very very tribal knowledge in like the deep parts of the pockets of the organization, and then moving that knowledge out of that system is kind of tedious. But theoretically, technically, I don't see any challenge around bringing those systems into no-code, low-code. Let's call it low-code. There's definitely some code there. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.